when I came up with the term, it was 1987, and the emphasis was really on community rather than the virtual part, because people were asking me whether anyone besides some kind of maybe anti-social electrical engineer would be interested in using computers to communicate with people. And I was very excited because what I had discovered in bulletin board systems and ultimately the well were real people who became part of my life. In fact, babysat for my daughter. I was at their weddings. I went to their funerals. I sat by their deathbeds. Anything that you do in a real community was happening with this group of people, and I wanted to get the word out that even though we met through computers, we're real people and our relationships are real. I think we're at the point in history now where more people are living in cities than are not living in cities, and you can have communities in London and New York, these places that a lot of people characterize as being big, soulless, heartless places where nobody knows each other. Sounds like the internet, doesn't it? But you find a block, you find a pub, you find a place where people have real connection with each other. So I don't think we should be so quick to judge what's a real community and what's not. We need to look at the reality and the authenticity of the relationships, a connection with. In fact, the person you make a connection with might be on the other side of the world. And while that's not true of everybody, certainly for me, and I bet it's true for you, there are very few places in the world where I can go and not get at least one and maybe 15 people to show up for lunch or dinner, and the conversation starts immediately because we know that we share some things in common. So does it matter that you're...
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard
Or
it.
around
I'd never
or
heard it
about.
said. I'd always
That's
seen
all
the
right.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
Mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
As I mentioned, I have no desire to be a part of the internet because I feel like I'm so inundated with information all the time that I don't want more. Don't you ever feel like it's just constant bombardment?
I don't know. I guess the thing I'd resent most is I would resent the, at least when you're home, if the phone rings, you have the option of not answering it. On the internet, people can send you messages all the time people you don't even want to hear from.
The internet's something magical. The internet is a large space full of things.
Made out of electricity. A virtual world.
Technology, sort of. I honestly don't know how to explain the definition of Wi-Fi. I don't know how to explain it, but...
I can't really explain it. The best thing ever. Energy.
Those little lines on your iPad. Electricity that helps your phone work.
But if you don't have Wi-Fi, you couldn't download apps and stuff. You don't want to see me if there's no Wi-Fi. I want my internet to be this fast, but not this fast. This fast, that fast. The internet has to be this fast.
Like a Bugatti. A car with jets. The speed of light. If I was traveling the speed of the internet, my face would probably be melting off.
I don't know how to explain it, but it's very fast. I don't want slow Wi-Fi.
Are the kids behaving differently online?
It's not so much that they're behaving differently as much as that we have a sense of visibility that we've never seen before. So we're used to being able to see a certain group of kids in certain places, right? The mall, we can see kids hanging out with their friends that way. But as adults, we don't typically have a really good sense of all the kids and a good sense of where they are and what they're doing when they're with their friends. What's going on online is, in many ways, it's youth space. So they're there, they're goofing around as though they're there just with their friends. And so what ends up happening is you can get a sense of what's going on really in broad sweeps. And it isn't just the kids like the kids in your community, but the kids who are in different communities all around the world with all sorts of different ideas of what is normative behavior.
How different is it from like when I was a kid, I'd come to the mall and I'd do stuff at the mall, or I'd go to the movie theater or whatever. How different is it?
Think about what happens when you were doing that with your friends, right? You were there, you were joking around, you were gossiping, you were flirting, you were kind of consuming culture and consuming merchandise, but it was part of this all-encompassing social experience. The same thing is actually happening fully online, right? So all of those everyday practices, the gossip, the flirting, the joking around, that's taking place online. We're seeing it play out. So young people who are engaged online, they're primarily engaged with the people they already know. They're friends from school, they're friends from after-school activities, they're friends from around the community. We also see marginalized kids who were desperately seeking some sort of support, and were often at loss, out in more traditional senses of schools or whatnot, finding a community online. And this is one of the more powerful narratives of the internet, right? Your queer kids who can actually find people like them, who can support them. They're much more willing to be public in a traditional sense because they're desperate for somebody who might be like them. For the popular kid, it's much more about being public to the school, people who will give them credit, that will give them status. And so we see these different groups contending with it differently. We also see the power of certain public figures, in negotiating with teenagers. So if you think about which teenagers are using Twitter in the earliest of stages, a lot of it comes down to who's talking to celebrities. And this wasn't that different from when I was growing up, and the idea of writing to the new kids on the block, right, the boy band of the day, in the hopes that you would get a letter, in response, right, which was inevitably a form letter, was the possibility of reaching out and getting a response, feeling as though that person really existed and they really recognized your existence. Twitter is a modern day incarnation of that for a lot of the celebrity teenager relationships, right? Can I get validation from, Miley Cyrus, who's now left Twitter, or Demi Lovato, or any number of these particular celebs. The idea that maybe I can actually get to meet Shaquille O'Neal in person because he'll announce where he is, right? All of that possibility. So you see that as another component. So there's always these publics, and these publics keep coming back, but the same practices are there.
Thing. The social web can do more good in the world than it can do bad. And it's the choice of people and the people who are using it as to what they want to do with it. It is the most empowering generational shift that has ever happened. And I think that is what makes it so compelling and so inspiring and so much fun. When you look at the fact that you can be sitting in your pajamas on your couch and help drive, world peace, that is actually happening today. That's possible in a way that it was never possible before. And I think that that's something that is incredibly important. So, does it mean that people have shorter attention spans? Yes, but is that a bad thing? Maybe, depending on what your point of view is. And so when I look at whether social technologies and the social web is a good thing or a bad thing, if it's horrible for society or wonderful for society, I think the reality is that it's here. It's not going away. And you can be sitting at your house in your pajamas, and you can actually impact the lives of someone sitting in a country hundreds of thousands of miles away that is wrought with political strife. You can say, I'm here, I'm listening to you. You can sit at your house and make change. And we're talking about social change and political change and economic change in a way that was never possible before. And I think that that's something that we should embrace, and that we should look at what are the ways that we're going to make it the best of what people can be, as opposed to the worst of what people can be. The internet is global. The world is global. And I think that when you look at, the fact that media is global today in a way that it never was before, it is going to have fundamental impact on the way the world works. And I think that's a good thing. What makes people so special, which is the fact that we're innovators and we are people who can change the world. So we now have tools. 25 years ago, we didn't have a way to impact the world in one single instant. Today we do, and it's through the internet.
Is this generation, are they going to be all right? Are the kids going to be doing okay? Or should we...
Kids are all right. The kids are all right. No, I absolutely believe that the possibilities and the opportunities for people to live a rich, passionate life that allows them to express themselves in all the ways that they want to, regardless of where they live geographically. I don't think it gets any better than that.
Sherry, how is this generation different in terms of how much we give to other people in terms of our information?
Well, I think this generation has a sense that information wants to be free and information about themselves wants to be free. And in a way, there's a kind of self-surveillance that I think that young people don't think about in political terms. But it is a political issue. People put their lives on the screen. They put really intimate details of their lives out there, and with very little thought that there might be people using that information in ways that are not benign. You have this sense of even young people looking for the interstices of the system to find a little privacy. And it's also hard to teach the relationship between intimacy and privacy. What is intimacy without privacy? I think this is really a question for this generation. But as we see what this generation looks like as it grows up with it, they're now a generation in retreat. They'll text, but they won't talk. One of the things that has been so, for somebody like me who does interviews and who believes in what you learn from the face, from, the philosophers tell us that we become human when we're confronted with another face through the voice, through the inflection of the voice. These kids don't want to see a face, they don't want to see a voice. This is no longer a generation that lives deliberately, that lives its life, that lives in the moment. And so I think we live in a kind of paradoxical time, and we're giving our teenagers a paradox, or the whole generation, not just our teenagers, but our babies growing up, a very paradoxical message. The world is more and more and more and more complex. On the other hand, we're only going to ask you a question that you can answer in 2 seconds. So we leave ourselves less and less time for reflection because our communications media push us to quick responses. It's not all good. It's not all good.
And the emphasis was really on community rather than the virtual part.
It is the most empowering generational shift that has ever happened.
We have a sense of visibility that we've never seen before. So
I think we're at the point in history.
As we see what this generation looks like as it grows up with it.
The internet is global. The world is global.